should probably talk about the difference between my outlook, I guess, and the Doomer outlook. Only because the last couple videos where I talked about this stuff, like, there was like two where I said, hey, don't be a Doomer, and then the most recent one probably sounds Doomerish, which I don't mean it to. I think it's all about perspective. And when I talk about my outlook, there should be a couple things that we preface. First of all, I don't know much, all right? I'm still in my late 20s. I haven't been on this journey for very long. I mean, technically, I've been on this journey my whole life, but in terms of actually even being aware that I'm on the journey, that's only been a few years. But I do think it's important, actually, to talk about this stuff now because, well, for one thing, there's just nothing wrong with being wrong, you know? There's nothing wrong with if I were to like become a master wizard in 50 years and then look back on this. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing with what I say now, because that means there's been growth. And also, I just don't think that we can afford to wait, you know? I'm not for the gatekeeping of information. A lot of, I don't know, maybe not a lot of, but I feel that everywhere, whenever I encounter somebody else who's in the know, so to speak, they're pretty much on the same page as like all the secret societies are, where, you know, don't throw your pearls to swine, separate the wheat from the chaff. Basically, gatekeep information. And I think that's ego. And I think it's also cowardice because, you know, Luciferians, they want to gatekeep information because they want to be gods and they don't want everybody else to be gods, you know? But if there's any benevolent secret societies out there, I'm not sure that there are anymore. There probably was at one point. If there are, I haven't encountered them yet, but if there's any benevolent secret society out there that is still gatekeeping information, from what I have read, heard, understood thus far in my journey, it's the reason they say keep your mouth shut is mostly because they don't want to be judged, they don't want to be laughed at, and they typically try to frame that as like something honorable. That's an honorable choice they're making, is to not have to deal with that shit. But to me, that's just part of it, you know? You're gonna be mocked anyway. Because even if you keep your mouth shut, there's still something that radiates off of you whenever you know things that other people don't. Whenever you're breaking free, so to speak. People notice and they Agent Smith you. And that can't be avoided. And I think it's cowardice to try to avoid it by not talking about this stuff. So even though I'm far from the most learned person out there, just talking about it in general, even if you're wrong about certain things, I think is still valid, because not talking about it and pretending that it's not happening is just not productive. And I don't believe that this knowledge is only for certain people. I don't believe in elitism. I believe in spreading the word to everybody, and then then it's up to each individual. You know, if any of the individuals say, I don't want this information, or I think you're a liar, or I think you're a hypocrite, or that you're a schizophrenic, or whatever, if they reject it, that's on them. But they deserve to have the chance to choose. They deserve to hear it. Most people don't even understand that they're being lied to. Or even if they do understand that they're being lied to, they don't understand how, and they don't understand what about. And I noticed that a lot. There's a lot of people I know who are aware that they're being lied to, but they're content to just, mostly go on pretending as though they're not being lied to, because they don't actually do any investigating. They don't want to figure out what they're being lied to about. They don't want to figure out at least what the potential truth is, as opposed to the lie. They're just not interested in that. But I think it's important to talk about. So, doomer shit. That's the focus. We're trying to get to that. My outlook is that I don't want to start with my outlook still. We got things to preface. I may chop this one up. I may edit this a little bit. I haven't edited the other ones at all. Life and death. Life and death are at play here. Understanding life as a wholly good thing and death as a wholly bad thing, and that being, I think, an incorrect interpretation that's at play here. It's not doomer to look forward to death. Okay? It's not doomer to look forward to death, because first of all, there is no death. Okay? There is no death. There's no permanent death. There is death of the ego. Okay? There is death of Evan Gertis. When I die, I firmly believe that Evan Gertis will cease to exist. When my physical body dies, Evan's gone. And even if that's not true, even if Evan lives on a little bit longer, I do think that eventually he still dies. You know, if there's trials in the astral realm to go through, then those trials are the same as the trials here on Earth, which is they're trials of detachment and they're trials of ego death, and they are trials that ultimately end in the dissolution of Evan Gertis. Okay? That doesn't mean that I'm totally dead because I believe in the soul. I just don't think that the soul is Evan Gertis. And some people, a lot of people, Christians, they disagree. But I don't know. I don't see how it can be the case. I don't see how we can say that we're fallen creatures and that we then live on in fallen bodies and fallen identities. I know Christ, redemption, all that, but I just don't think that's how the redemption works. I don't think that's what's being taught in the Bible. That's the other thing I wanted to preface. I remember now. What I wanted to preface is you have to, okay, if we're going to say that man is fallen, okay, let's just say that. Man is fallen, okay? If man is fallen, then we are completely incapable of reaching a valid conclusion about anything. And there's no reason to be theologians, there's no reason to be philosophers, there's no reason to debate anything, because we will never get to the right conclusions because we're fallen. So what I'm trying to say here is man's logic is either fully functional and fully valid, or it doesn't work at all. I don't see how there can be an in-between there. So that's one of my problems with exoteric, standard, quote-unquote, Christianity, is that priests and preachers and ministers and men of the cloth, if you will, are under this impression that they can say we're fallen, but then also we can judge everything we need to know about God to decide exactly how a person should live. And there's just all kinds of reasons that doesn't work. I mean, the commandment of no idols makes no sense within exoteric Christianity, because all of exoteric Christianity is idols. Okay? There's just too much inconsistency there. Jesus, Mother Mary, the saints, okay? These are idols, and it's not just Catholicism. Protestantism is guilty of this too, okay? Just because, if you're a Protestant, just because you don't pray to Mother Mary doesn't mean you're not guilty of idolatry, all right? You need to understand that Jesus may or may not have been the true incarnation of God. But God doesn't look like Jesus. You know, Jesus was an embodiment. That's what incarnation is. Jesus was an embodiment of God. But he didn't want to be worshipped. He was there to break down the churches. And I don't think he would have wanted a church built around his image, because his image was impermanent. Just the same way that the body of Evan Gertis is going to die and Evan Gertis as an identity will be gone, I also think that Yeshua, that was his real name, by the way, Yeshua of Nazareth, I think he's gone. I don't think that that's a person up in heaven. I think that was an expression of God. But that's not who God actually is, or what God actually is. And I think we are wrong to worship the image of Jesus. So that's going to get me a lot of fucking hate if anybody ever actually listens to these. But I think that that's idolatry. I don't think that that's what God actually is. And it's long been lost to the masses that the idea of religion is to approximate, not to get exactly right. Okay? I'm still trying to get back to the Doomer conversation. I'm going to ramble here a little bit, but I'll edit it, and it will be hopefully semi-coherent by the time I'm done. The story of Genesis, okay? Here's what I think is key to understand about the story of Genesis, and this will lead to the Doomer stuff, and why I feel like what I said in my last couple videos about like this dimension being hell and all that, why that works without it being Doomer. And by the way, when I say this is hell, when I say we're in hell right now, what I mean is, I think I tried to say this in the last video and it probably wasn't clear. I don't mean that we're in hell, but that's only because I don't believe in hell, okay? I call it Tom and Jerry hell. Tom and Jerry hell does not exist. There is no place of eternal fire with demons and pitchforks and boiling pots like you see in Tom and Jerry. That doesn't exist, okay? So when I say that we're in hell, I only mean that we're in the closest thing to people's exoteric understanding of hell that there can be, because this is a place of fucking infinite torment. As long as you're alive, you're being tormented, okay? But anyway, the story of Genesis, specifically what I mean is the story of Adam and Eve. When I was growing up and I was told in church about the eating of the fruit, that was called original sin, okay? First of all, a little technicality here. That couldn't have been original sin. Why? Well, because the snake was already there. So in exoteric Christianity, the snake is Satan, okay? In other words, the story that was told in Paradise Lost, which is the story of Satan's rebellion in heaven and him being cast down into Tom and Jerry hell, that had already happened. And I'm treating Milton's Paradise Lost as biblical, truth here, because that's how people act. People basically, without realizing it, have continued for hundreds of years, however long it's been since Milton wrote that. They've treated Paradise Lost as biblical canon, because that's what preachers preach. They preach hellfire and brimstone, and that comes from Paradise Lost, and it comes from Dante's Inferno, and it comes from everyone forgetting that those stories are metaphorical. By the way, that doesn't mean that they're not also literal. I actually I'm more typically an advocate for the idea that there's a literal and a metaphorical truth to be found in all of these things, in religion and philosophy and theories about the spirit realm. I think that as above, so below is a natural law, and I think that it extends to the literal and the metaphorical. I think there's probably literal angels and demons, and I think there's also metaphorical value to the idea of angels and demons? I think it's probably both. And even if it's not both, I think it's helpful to speak as though it's both, because that's the way to not exclude anybody. You know, if I were to say that like my target audience is anyone who has some brand of Christian belief and Christian background, whether it's exoteric or esoteric, whether it's Protestant, Catholic, Gnostic, whatever, I think the marriage of those is giving value to that. Like, it could be literal or metaphorical or both. I think allowing for that is key. Not because that's necessarily true, but just because it allows everybody to be a part of the conversation. You know what I mean? Anyway, that couldn't have been original sin, okay? Man eating the apple was not original sin, because Satan had already sinned, according to exoteric biblical canon, because exoteric biblical canon treats Paradise Lost as truth. That's the lore. That's the lore to Satan's character, is he rebelled and was cast down. And if the snake is Satan, then that had already happened before the Garden of Eden. So man biting into the apple was not original sin. It was man's original sin, sure, but it was not the original sin. And I think this is important to note, because if God gave a shit about redemption for disobedience, if God gave a shit about somebody disobeying some stupid little rule and then being damned to hell for eternity and needing forgiveness for that, presumably he would have kickstarted the entire Bible, gospel, redemption story for Satan, because Satan was also a creation of God. I mean, no, like, I'm pretty sure everybody agrees on that. If God is the creator of everything, he created Satan. So if Satan rebelled, just like humans did, and humans get the redemption of Christ, then why didn't Satan get that? Well, it's because God doesn't care about disobedience. I firmly believe that if there's a true God out there, he's not a petty God. And I don't believe he's a jealous God. I have to really tread lightly here, because I'm not ready to go too deep into Gnostic ideas just yet. But if you're familiar with any Gnostic ideas, especially about certain aspects of the Old Testament, then you can probably connect the dots and know where that conversation would naturally lead us. But the true God is not petty. He can't be, or he's not God. I don't have any real evidence to back that up, though I'm sure other people have made arguments long before I ever came to this earth. But I'm not interested. By the way, I'm going to say a lot of shit in videos like this that I have no evidence for. Not because there is no evidence, but just because in my 4-year journey so far, I've done my best to compile some books and some podcasts and some lectures and things. But, like, I'm not a scholar, and I don't have time to be a scholar, and I don't have a big-ass source of fucking... I don't have a bibliography, you know? I'm not writing a research paper on this shit anytime soon for a grad course. So it's not that there isn't sources and evidence out there. I'm just not interested in providing them to you, okay? This is just like, if you're one of the 1 or 2 people out there who resonates with what I'm saying, I'm just giving you a head start, all right? I'm trying to give you a battery jump, so to speak. Google the keywords that I say, or fucking whatever. Just do what you need to do. You'll find the sources. They're out there. You'll find them in your own research. I don't have time to validate everything I say, because I don't really care. I'm not making arguments here. I'm not trying to set myself up for a debate with somebody in the comments section. So, if you're looking for my sources, the answer is go find your own sources. Everybody's journey has to be their own, okay? I'm not that good at explaining this stuff. I'm not trying to prescribe anybody anything. other than start asking questions. That's the only prescription I can give you. Anyway, sorry I'm so off track on this one. It's Monday. I'm driving to work like I usually do, but I'm driving there earlier. I had to wake up earlier, so I know that I'm rambling. So, original sin was committed by Satan. And even though it's not mankind's original sin, I just think that if God actually cared about sin in the way that exoteric Christianity says he does, then the journey of allowing for forgiveness and redemption and a return to God, that would have happened for Satan and Satan's fallen angels. That's what I think, if God cared. Because why wouldn't he care? They're his creation as much as humans are. I don't think that humans are special. That's something else that, something else. Everything that I say is going to be stuff that people disagree with and are like, what? You don't think humans are special? No, I don't. Not any more than anything else that is in the world. There's a lot of beautiful things in the cosmos. I don't think humans are special. We're special in that there's nothing else quite like us, but then everything is special. And when everyone's super, nah. You all know. Anyway, the point is, when I was a kid, being taught the Garden of Eden story, the idea, as far as I ever grasped it, was Adam and Eve disobeyed God, and the disobedience was the original sin, and that's why mankind is damned, and that's why we need Christ. And I don't really track with that anymore. What I track with is this idea that, first of all, Lucifer and Satan are different entities. That doesn't have to be the case, but I just have such a great suspicion of all exoteric Christianity at this point that I'm more ready to say Lucifer and Satan are different entities than I am ready to say they're the same entity. I think the Bible's a hodgepodge of names and eras and mythology and lies. Church propaganda lies in certain areas. Not that it always was like that, but just that it became like that. And people, I know, like, this stupid idea that faith in God has to be faith in the Bible or faith in the church. Like, the moment you question what's in the Bible, the moment you try to use actual history and actual scholarly research and academia to back up an argument for some of the Bible being flawed, people are like, what? You don't believe that God would work through man and work through history and create the perfect book that everybody... And it's like, no, I don't fucking believe that. Because that's not faith in God. I know you think that's faith in God, but it's not. Okay? That's faith in the church. That's faith in the people who chose the biblical canon. And I think those were wicked people, by and large. If not wicked, they were certainly foolish. Okay? There is a lot missing from the Bible that ought to be in the Bible. There's a lot in the Bible that doesn't need to be in the Bible. And the reason that I don't have faith in God to create the perfect book is because I don't have faith that God wants to create the perfect book or wants to create the perfect religion, because Jesus came to earth and smashed religion. That was the whole idea. That's why he went to the temple and drove everybody out. He said, no more religion. Okay? The kingdom of God is within you. That's what Jesus said. And also, we're not to worship idols. That's what Jesus said. So in other words, you don't need religion, including Christianity, to find God. In fact, it is more helpful to you if you don't have religion. It's easier to find God without religion, because it doesn't, if you approach the search for God and the search for salvation without any preconceived notions, then it comes to you easier because you got less baggage to deal with. And that's the truth. I don't know much, but I know that. Okay? don't have faith that God worked through mankind and worked through time to create the perfect Bible. And I think that worshiping the Bible, which is what having faith in the Bible is, I think that's also idolatry. We're so fucking turned around. The way to God is to follow the little inner light within you that Christians call the Holy Spirit. And a lot of times, just like it did with me, the Holy Spirit is going to lead you away from the church. Because you don't need it after a while. The masses need it, the ill-informed masses, but the whole idea, that's why I want to talk about this shit, even though I'm not an expert yet, because the whole idea is, I think, we ought to shrink the numbers of the masses until everybody is informed. And then again, like I said, you can either choose to take the knowledge that you're given or you can reject it, and that's on you. But I'm not elitist. I think everybody should fucking have the chance to choose. Anyway, still trying to stay on the Doomer track. Specifically, the refutation of the idea that I'm a Doomer, because I don't want anybody to listen to the last 2-3 videos which kind of conflict with each other or sound like they conflict with each other and think that I'm a hypocrite. I may be a hypocrite, but if I am, it's on accident. I'm trying to explain where I'm coming from and why I think the dissolution of the self and why I think death and the looking forward to death and all that I mentioned before. I'm trying to explain why that's not Doomer. There's just a lot of other clarifications you have to get through first to get to that. Okay. So, I think that disobedience was not the original sin. I think that the Garden of Eden story is about Lucifer bringing the knowledge of good and evil to mankind, and that fucked us over, okay? And here's how. Lucifer is a name that means light bearer, okay? What light? Well, when you gain knowledge, you are enlightened. So Lucifer brought enlightenment, believe it or not. Enlightenment's typically thought of as a good thing, not necessarily, okay? Adam and Eve did not eat from the tree of evil. They ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So what that means is they became enlightened to the difference between good and evil. And this is the actual curse of humanity. Humanity's not damned to some hell at a future date. That's not what happened. They're doomed to know the difference between good and evil. So in other words, they are no longer animals. Animals operate off of instincts. They have a level of consciousness, yes. Everything has a level of consciousness. There's vibrational, physics shit that, again, you can look up if you want sources. There's fucking CIA documents that have been revealed in the last 10, 20 years that confirm everything has a level of consciousness, okay? But there's a certain level of consciousness that you reach, and all of a sudden, you know the difference between good and evil. And so that's what happens in the Garden of Eden. And that's why we're all miserable. Because our human animal bodies operate more or less still off of instinct, I think. And that's why we do such bad shit. But we didn't realize that it was bad when we were animals. We were just doing things. We didn't realize that killing was bad. We were just killing. We were driven by instinct to one-up each other. That was always there. That didn't come about because of sin. That was always part of the cycle. Mother Nature, by the way, Mother Nature, that being a very vague concept, but Mother Nature is more God than anyone's, biblical idea, exoteric biblical idea of God is, because Mother Nature is this abstract thing. Mother Nature was always there. Death was always there because the cycle of life and death was always there. The issue is consciousness. Okay? Man was given the gift of having an ego, of having a realization of self, but that gift came with a curse. So there's a duality. There's always an equal evil or equal bad aspect to everything as there is an equal good aspect to everything. So the gift of selfhood came with the curse of knowledge. And me personally, this is what I was trying to get across in the last video. Me personally, I think that kind of is a sucky way to live. And I don't know if this level of consciousness was a evolutionary mistake, like it just kind of happened, or if there's an actual reason for it, like karmically, or we have to learn lessons, or we have to continue evolving spiritually. There may be things like that. I tend to be disinterested in that these days. I don't resonate with Hyperborean attitudes about, like, you know, we all have missions to complete and we all got to go on quests. And I think really the reason I don't resonate with that is, like, sort of, again, if the true God gave a shit about that, really, then we wouldn't be born into this world not remembering what came before. I think most of us have a sense that we were here before, or that we existed before in some way, and we can barely remember it now. So now we don't know what, if any, our missions are. And so I'm not inclined to try to figure that out, because men have spent their entire lives just trying to figure out why we're here. And if we were going to figure that shit out, we would have by now. Okay? If we do have missions that we're supposed to complete, the true God is not going to... His feelings won't be hurt if we spend one more incarnation not completing that mission. He'll chide us maybe, but he's not going to damn us for that. So it's not a concern of mine. I resonate with this idea that even if we have a mission or karma to clear or whatever, that in and of itself, like, I think karma can be cleared just by detaching from it, by choosing to ignore it, basically. I think that's as fine a way to clear karma as any other way that there might be. What I was trying to illustrate in the last video is that I think living in this world of duality, it just wears thin after a while. It was fun, sure. It was fun for a time. But I personally have reached the point where I no longer feel it's worth it to experience the evil just to get to experience the good. It's all a little too perfectly balanced out these days. There's not more good in the world than there is evil. And I have a fine life, but there's not more good in my life than there is evil. It's a little too perfectly balanced. And honestly, the perfectly balanced thing is not worth it. The scales need to tip toward good, or it's not worth it. I don't like the exchange. I don't like exchanging moments of joy for moments of sorrow, because the moments of sorrow are always equal in intensity to the moments of joy, because that's the law of the universe. That's how it works when you're at this level of consciousness. And I don't personally care to experience that forever. And I think a lot of people who wake up and become tinfoil hats and third eye people and truthers, or whatever you want to call them, they all want to just, like, advance. But I think that's a Luciferian idea. Luciferians are the ones who want to advance, and they want to become gods. And they think they can manifest lives without evil for themselves. They think they can find workarounds. That's why Hollywood movies show off exactly what evil forces in the world are doing. It's because they think they can sell us stories that are pro-Luciferian and get our money and our applause at the theater, and that will karmically clear them. And I don't think that's true. I think that's going to come back to bite them in the ass one day. And even if it doesn't, it's not worth it to me personally still, to know that I screwed over all these millions of people just so that I could live like a god. So I have no interest in advancing. I would rather regress. Towards the beginning of my journey, when I ate the old Alice in Wonderland plant and I set up on the mountains in Arizona, it was as if I was experiencing what it was like to be a rock, just sitting there as part of the mountain. I had very little idea of the self. I had just enough consciousness left to know that I was content. And the reason that I was content was because I was up on the mountain, removed from the world, to the extent that I no longer, for those few hours, was really experiencing any joy or sorrow. I was experiencing that thing for which there is no word in our limited, very peasant-like English language. There's no word for nirvana. Nirvana is not happiness. Heaven is not happiness. It's actually the removing of oneself from happiness and joy. Because to remove oneself from happiness and joy is to remove oneself from the experiencing of the opposite of happiness and joy. With happiness and joy, there must be sorrow and pain. That is the trade-off. That will never go away. And so I sort of think that it's not really about advancing in this dualism, in this world of dualism. It's actually about regressing. It's about returning to a level of consciousness where you're not aware of the knowledge of good and evil. That's redemption. If you don't want that, then you don't want redemption and you don't want salvation. That's what I think. And to further perhaps expand on my logic here, I was using the phrase cult of longevity a lot in my last video. It's important to understand that when I say cult of longevity, I'm referring to the Luciferians and the Satanists and the New World Order and the Eyes Wide Shut people. It's not all one organization. A lot of conspiracy theorists make that mistake and they get mocked for it. And the people who mock the conspiracy theorists are correct. It's ridiculous to think that there's one all-powerful organization controlling things from behind the scenes. And Hollywood movies reveal that that's not the case, too. It's not one organization. It's a bunch of different factions. And the factions are at war with each other. What do you think the last several Mission Impossible movies are about? The IMF is a secret society that has operated without oversight for decades and directed the course of world events, but for the good of the people. They're still gatekeeping knowledge, but they're trying to protect the masses. Whereas the Syndicate, Hydra, S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra from Avengers, the same thing, same story, same truth. That's a secret society that's out for themselves and they want to destroy. And that's why there's as much knowledge out there as there is because these factions are at war with each other, and some of them want some of the knowledge to be out there, and some of them don't want any of the knowledge to be out there, and so there's all these cracks in the simulation. But anyway, the evil cult is what I'm referring to when I say the cult of longevity, because a lot of conspiracy theorists want to call the evil cults death cults. And I understand the clickbaity thing of you learn that there's people out there who are sacrificing babies because they want to mimic Kronos, the god of time who ate his children, and Kronos is Saturn and Saturn is Satan, and that's where it all comes from. I understand that you hear that and it freaks you out and you get fixated on that, but it's very important to make the clarification that just because satanic cults might be murdering babies as rituals now and again during certain astrologically relevant times, that doesn't make them death cults. They do not worship death. They are cults of longevity. They worship life. They want to live forever. Specifically, they want their ego to live forever. They do not want to die to themselves. They do not want the self to dissolve. Okay? which is why I think that it's not doomer to say, I look forward to death and I look forward to the dissolution of the self, because that's exactly the opposite of what the Luciferians want. So therefore, I have to assume that's the right choice. You know, the opposite of whatever the left-hand path people are doing, that's probably the best thing for you to be doing. I feel it's the best thing for me to be doing. You know, I'm not saying I haven't fallen for some stupid shit in my time. The journey of waking up is a journey of, like, you keep thinking you found the right book, the right secret society, the right teaching, but there is no right secret society, right teaching, whatever, because it's all founded upon ego, and it's all founded upon the self. And if you don't have an understanding of the self, then you can't grasp any of these teachings of these secret societies, because they all worship the self, and they all worship the idea of man becoming God. That's the one consistency that they all have. So I'm not saying I've never, you know, tried to Neville Goddard my life. I've fallen for that shit. It's embarrassing, yeah, but we all might as well admit it. It's happened to all of us in one way or another. But the way I've been able to alchemize my time as a Luciferian, you know, that's really the way you ought to phrase it if you're being honest with yourself. There's a lot of ways when you're waking up, there's a lot of paths that will open themselves up to you, and you will walk down them. You will accidentally become a Luciferian, but it's okay. You'll realize that it's all bullshit, and just like you did when you were leaving the Christian church or whatever you left the first time, you'll turn back around and you'll redeem yourself, and it'll be fine. Okay, you don't have to panic just because you were accidentally a Luciferian for a couple months. We've all been there, man. We've all had our extreme pro-capitalist Wolf of Wall Street phases. We've all had our extreme pro-communist Thomas More's Utopia phases. And then we've all exited the socioeconomic political debate landscape completely. We've all been Republican, we've all been Democrat, we've all realized, oh, that's just two sides of the same coin. It's all controlled by a couple old men playing chess with themselves, like that dude in the Pixar short, or like Emperor Palpatine, if you will. There's no republic, there's no separatists, okay? It's one guy that's waging war on himself for fun, so that eventually everything will be destroyed and then he can rise to power. So it's okay if you've accidentally been a Luciferian without knowing, because whatever you joined was not calling themselves Luciferian and it wasn't clear. It's okay. Don't freak out about it. I've been there. I'm out of it now. You'll get out of it too. But that's the way I alchemize my time as a Luciferian, is I take what I learned, which is Luciferians worship the self, and I apply that logically, because I don't think man has fallen. I don't think man ever fell, and I think man's logic is perfectly employable. I think the knowledge of good and evil was not a fall, it was actually a rise. It was just a mistake to rise. Or if it wasn't a mistake, then it was for some other purpose that we are incapable of understanding, so it's just too far above us. Mankind's logic is not fallen, but it does have limits. And those are two different things. But anyway, I take what I learned as a Luciferian, which is they worship the self, and if evil people worship the self, then I want to do the opposite of that. So I put all my energy toward the dissolution of the self. I don't really feel like anything I do is for the completing of a mission. I think that's ridiculous. Again, I don't know what my mission is, and if it mattered that much, then a fucking angel would come down from the sky and tell me what it is. And that may happen one day. Maybe I'm just not mentally prepared to handle that. But for right now, it hasn't happened, so I'm operating off the assumption that it's not going to happen anytime soon. Again, I might be wrong. Maybe everything I say in these videos is wrong. I don't care. I'm going to say it anyway, because we need to have these conversations. But if the Luciferians worship the self, if they are a cult of longevity, then I'm going to be the death cult. I think that sounds like a great idea. I have no sentimentality left in my body. I mean, I do, obviously, or I wouldn't still be here, but I'm trying to basically get to the point that I can Obi-Wan Kenobi myself out of existence. That seems like the most appealing choice to me. Get to the point where you have so surrendered yourself and your selfhood and so surrendered all your desires that you can just dissolve into nothingness. And again, it's not a complete death. It's just death of the body. It's death of Evan Gertis. Okay? I'm not advocating for suicide, and I'm not advocating for the doomer idea that there is no life after death. I don't think this is a doomer attitude. I've been trying to explain why I think death of the self is a good thing and why it's not a doomer attitude to look forward to that and want to that and set one's thoughts to that. Because I do really like the Bill Donahue idea of we are light bulbs, our bodies are light bulbs, and the light bulbs will die, but the energy, the electricity will live on. I think it is something like that. I think the imagination and the spirit realm are more or less the same thing, and I think that whatever my predominant thoughts, feelings, experiences are, somehow or another, they will live on. And that's what we call the soul. But I think that that's so far away in terms of like our capacity of understanding that after we clarify that, we don't need to dwell on that anymore. All right? All we need to dwell on is how do we die to ourselves. For me, that's sort of just like I've just realized everything is compulsory. And that's why I have no sentimentality left, because I have realized, I don't know how I got to this realization. I can't give you any advice on how to get to this realization. It'll just come in time. But I've realized that everything we do as humans at this level of consciousness is a compulsion or an addiction, as I was saying in my last couple videos. Human beings are just monkeys, rats in the maze, whose brains get hooked on these little dopamine things, and we happen to be at a higher level of consciousness so that we can understand what's happening to us at the same time. And so, unlike the rats in the maze, we experience a greater level of pain. And I'm just sick of that level of pain, and I don't get enough dopamine from anything I do anymore to justify joy and pain together in the same life. I'm sick of that. I'm sick of duality. So I know there's a lot of Hyperborean people out there who want to wage war on the Luciferians, want to wage war on the Archons. I don't give a shit. All right? I don't give a shit. I want to dissolve into the Sophia soul soup. And I don't know. I'm not afraid to admit it. Everything I do, I see it as compulsory. Making these videos is compulsory. One day I will stop doing it. Watching movies is compulsory. One day I will stop doing it. Doing anything that I enjoy is compulsory. And I know that anything I do that I enjoy will inevitably be balanced out by something that I don't enjoy. And that's what I'm sick of. And that's what I think the curse of humanity is. That's what I think the eating of the apple from the tree was. And it's just time to say goodbye to all that. Going to work is compulsory, and yet here I am.